It's September 21st here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. Starting with President Yoon Suk-yeol's UN speech. The South Korea leader has told the UN that Russia helping North Korea with weapons development would be a direct provocation against South Korea, warning that Seoul and its partners will not stand idly by. And regarding Pyongyang-Moscow military cooperation, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says the U.S. is doing all it can to stop Pyongyang from potentially providing arms support to Moscow. The U.S. Federal Reserve leaves its benchmark interest rate unchanged for the second time in its past 3 meetings, while signaling a fresh rate rise this year and fewer cuts next year. President Yoon Suk-yeol once again called out Russia and North Korea for their potential arms collaboration, this time at the UN General Assembly. He also called for reform for the UN Security Council, where Russia holds veto power. Our Oh Soo-young explains.
President Yoon Suk-yeol says a reform may be due for the United Nations' most powerful body on global security, expressing Seoul's firmest stance yet against Russia's potential arms cooperation with North Korea and its ongoing invasion of Ukraine. In his speech at the United Nations General Assembly on Wednesday, he reiterated that North Korea's nuclear and missile programs pose a direct and existential threat to the South and a serious challenge to global security. Following the recent summit between the North Korean and Russian leaders, Yoon said if Pyongyang acquires the information and technology needed to enhance its weapons of mass destruction in exchange for supplying Moscow with conventional weapons, this would amount to a direct provocation, threatening the peace and security of both Ukraine and South Korea. He said Seoul, its allies and its partners will not stand by idly.
세계 평화의 최종적 수호자여야 할 UN 안보리 상임이사국이 다른 주권 국가를 무력 침공해 전쟁을 일으키고 전쟁 수행에 필요한 무기와 군수품을 안보리 결의를 정면으로 위반하는 정권으로부터 지원받는 현실은 자기 모순적입니다.
The Security Council's 5 permanent members include Russia and China, with both countries critically hindering collective action with their veto powers. Particularly following Moscow's invasion of Ukraine, the idea of reforming the Council to expand representation of non-permanent member countries or removing the right to veto has been gaining currency, with the leaders of the United States, Japan, Ukraine and the European Union endorsing the move in their own General Assembly speeches this year.
나라마다 군사력의 크기는 다르지만 우리 모두가 굳게 연대하여 힘을 모을 때 그리고 원칙에 입각해 일관되게 행동할 때 어떠한 불법적 도발도 차단할 수 있을 것입니다.
As a non-permanent member of the United Nations for a 2-year term beginning next year, Yoon expressed his intention to take a responsible and principled role in international peace and security. He reiterated his pledge to roll out comprehensive support for Ukraine under Seoul's Ukraine Peace and Solidarity Initiative. At the G20 summit earlier this month, the leader committed over $2.3 billion in aid and assistance to Kyiv, which would include long-term low-interest loans for reconstruction projects, including infrastructure and education. Through a series of multilateral engagements, the Yoon government has been expanding the scope of Seoul's diplomacy from regional affairs concerning the Korean Peninsula to Indo-Pacific security and global governance.
국제 평화와 안전 없이 우리는 어떠한 발전과 번영도 이룰 수 없습니다.
President Yoon said going forward, world leaders share the responsibility of passing on to future generations an international order grounded in justice and the rule of law for freedom, peace and prosperity. He said South Korea, together with the UN, will readily take on this responsibility. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News, New York.
Also, during his speech in New York, President Yoon set out his plan for global prosperity by tackling certain divisions between developed and developing countries. Our Kim Do-yeon has the details.
President Yoon Suk-yeol at the podium of the UN General Assembly on Wednesday said the word division 13 times during his 15-minute speech. The frequency of the use of the word highlights President Yoon's ambition to make South Korea a global contributor, which helps developing economies to close the gap with other nations.
오늘날 전례 없는 글로벌 복합 위기 속에서 안보는 물론 경제, 기술, 보건, 환경, 문화 등 모든 분야에 걸쳐 국가 간 격차가 커지고 있습니다. 이러한 격차를 줄이고 세계 모든 국가들이 상생해 나아가기 위해서는 국제사회가 강력히 연대해야 하며 유엔이 그 중심에 서야 합니다.
According to President Yoon, South Korea will tackle 3 specific divisions: infrastructure development, the impact of climate change, and digital capabilities. The developmental gap refers to countries that lack essential infrastructure for living, such as clean water and sanitation systems. To achieve this, South Korea will raise its official development assistance budget by 40% in 2024. Much of that will go into education and training to help countries build the capacity to progress socially and economically on their own. To address the climate change gap, South Korea will scale up its Green ODA to assist vulnerable countries with reducing carbon emissions and accelerating their transition to clean energy, promising $300 million to the Green Climate Fund. It's also seeking to set up the carbon-free alliance with nations that are willing to promote the adoption of carbon-free energy. For the digital divide, which President Yoon says is a major cause of economic division between nations, South Korea will actively support digital transformation for lower-income economies. In addition, it'll lead in the establishment of an international organization under the UN to discuss and set forth rules regarding digital ethics. The president wrapped up his speech with another push for Busan's World Expo 2030 bid, tying it together with the nation's motivation to step up as a globally contributing nation.
대한민국은 이제 유라시아 대륙과 태평양을 연결하는 관문인 부산에서 2030년 엑스포를 개최함으로써 글로벌 책임 국가의 역할을 적극 수행하고자 합니다.
He added that the Busan Expo will serve as a platform to spread freedom in the spirit of solidarity through which the world's citizens can overcome crises and challenges together. 1 year ago, President Yoon emphasized freedom and solidarity here at the UN. And since then, he has fostered stronger relations with like-minded nations. Now, for this year, as he commits to bridging the mentioned divisions, he has set out measures to put his vision into even more practical actions. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News, New York.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says that Washington is doing all it can to stop Pyongyang from potentially giving armed support to Moscow. Speaking in an interview with broadcaster NBC on Wednesday, the top U.S. diplomat added that the summit between the two leaders last week showed a certain amount of desperation from Russia due to the prolonged war in Ukraine. On the same day, 2 U.S. lawmakers introduced a bill calling for the expansion of sanctions against the North's support for Russia's war in Ukraine. Democrat Gary Connolly and Republican Joe Wilson tabled the bill to provide for the imposition of sanctions with respect to North Korea's support for Russia's illegal war in Ukraine. So more stark warnings from South Korea to Russia and North Korea over their military and arms collaboration. Let's take a closer look at President Yoon Suk-yeol's UN speech with Professor Min Jung-hoon this morning. It's good to have you with us.
Good morning.
President Yoon said any arms deal between Russia and North Korea would be considered a direct provocation against South Korea. Now, that means he's taking their military collaboration pretty seriously, right?
Yes, and compared to the last year, this year's warning is much more stronger than last year, considering the situation where North Korea is enhancing its military cooperation with Russia, and it could impose serious military threats to South Korea. As you mentioned, President Yoon made a strong warning against the military cooperation between North Korea and Russia when he delivered a keynote speech to the U.S. Security General Assembly in New York. And he said that any arms deal between North Korea and Russia would be considered as a direct provocation against South Korea. He shows that South Korea perceives the military cooperation between North Korea and Russia very, very seriously as a matter of national security. And it has been known that North Korea will receive the information and technology necessary to improve the weapons of mass destruction capabilities like ICBM and SLBM technologies in exchange for providing Russia with conventional weapons like ammunition and rockets. And if North Korea receives the advanced military technologies from Russia and make progress in its nuclear and missile capabilities, there will be no doubt that such an improved North Korean military capabilities will impose greater security threats to South Korea and its partners like the United States and Japan. So South Korea and its partners like the US and Japan will pay close attention to changes in North Korea's military capabilities in the coming months, as well as they'll also try to enhance their military cooperation against North Korea's increasing military threats.
Definitely. And I would like to point out how Yoon said Russia, North Korea, not North Korea, Russia, which has been his usual way of saying it when talking about their military cooperation. Now, the question is, why the change?
Well, basically, I don't think that such a way of saying or speaking reflects a meaningful or significant change in the inter-Korean relations. Instead, personally, I think that it's just a diplomatic rhetoric that South Korea expresses its strong grievance against North Korea. As you know, North Korea has been making illegal military developments despite the international community's strong warnings, and now it is pursuing military cooperation with Russia, which is also illegal. So I think that North Korea is showing unacceptable behaviors, and South Korea is responding to the North Korea's misconduct in various diplomatic ways, including President Yoon's and the high-ranking government officials' strong warnings against North Korea, international community's support for South Korea's positions against North Korea, and changes in a way of saying or speaking the sequence of the two countries, North Korea and Russia, or Russia and North Korea.
So that phrasing doesn't reflect the status of inter-Korean relations, rather it's a diplomatic rhetoric, you're saying?
Yes, it's correct.
And, President Yoon said that South Korea and its allies and partners will not just sit and watch what Russia and North Korea do. Does that mean more sanctions? I mean, what could they be?
Well, there could be several options that South Korea and its partners, like the United States and Japan, would take to respond to the arms deals between North Korea and Russia. In my opinion, first, they are likely to strengthen their military cooperation to cope with the military movement between North Korea and Russia. And that if they have concrete evidence on the arms deals between North Korea and Russia, then it is expected that they will try to impose more sanctions against North Korea and Russia in the international stage, like the UN Security Council resolutions, and each country will also try to impose more unilateral sanctions against them. Meanwhile, it is very likely that other major international community members, like many European countries and other democratic countries, will support for what South Korea and its partners will do against North Korea and Russia. So basically, I think that the measures that the South Korea and its partners will take are likely to impose more limitations to North Korea and Russia in the international stage.
That's a very good point, Professor Min. Now, the Russian delegation didn't look too happy when President Yoon was giving his speech. Do you think North Korea in any way will react to Yoon's speech?
Yes, basically, I think that North Korea will react to President Yoon's speech by making counter arguments based on their own arguments or their reasoning. I think that North Korea will argue that it is pursuing the military cooperation with Russia mainly because U.S. and its partners are imposing serious security threats to North Korea. Specifically, it will argue that it is the United States that is making the security situation on the Korean Peninsula more grave and serious, and South Korea and Japan are just on the same side with the U.S. So it suggests that North Korea will continue to go its way to make progress its military capabilities with the help of Russia and possibly China. So it is likely that North Korea will also continue to take advantage of the security environment over the Korean Peninsula. It will continue to support for Russia and China in the international stage and try to improve the military or the trilateral cooperation among them. So it is expected that the competition and conflict over the Korean Peninsula will be grave for some time.
Right, taking Yoon's speech as an excuse to go ahead with they want to do with Russia. Before I let you go, Professor Min, Yoon also said South Korea increased next year's official development assistance, that's ODA, by more than 40%. What does that say about South Korea's commitment to aiding countries, those are in need?
So basically, we have to think of the directions of foreign policy that the Yoon government is pursuing. The directions of the foreign policy under the Yoon government include establishing South Korea as a global pivotal state. It means that the scope of South Korea's diplomacy is going beyond the Korean Peninsula and reaching out throughout the Indo-Pacific region. And the South Korea is trying to play more active roles and take more responsibilities. And such activities include providing financial contributions to the developing countries and the global South. And they needed to receive the international community's helping hands for improving their domestic capabilities and economic developments. So with the greater roles and responsibilities, South Korea is trying to become a responsible and trustworthy stakeholder in the international community.
Right, definitely aligning with the Yoon government's diplomatic approach. Thank you so much, Professor Min, for connecting with us all the way from Texas this morning. You enjoy your evening.
Thank you.
And President Yoon continued his diplomatic efforts to support the Busan 2030 World Expo bid. Yoon met with leaders of Switzerland, the Central African Republic, Kyrgyzstan, Israel, and Hungary to discuss cooperation and ask for their support for Busan's bid. He celebrated the 60th anniversary of diplomatic relations with Switzerland, and he discussed development cooperation in fields like healthcare and agriculture with the Central African Republic and Kyrgyzstan. In addition, President Yoon discussed with Israel's Prime Minister expanding their partnership in advanced technologies and talked with Hungary's president about high-tech industries and addressing low birth rates. The U.S. Fed says its key borrowing rates will remain steady. But the Fed Chair Jerome Powell is hinting at a rate hike later this year as its battle against inflation is not over yet. Lee Sin-jae with more.
Following a two-day Federal Open Market Committee meeting, the U.S. Fed on Wednesday decided to freeze its key interest rates in the 5.25% to 5.50% range. The latest rate freeze marks just the second time the central bank has decided to leave its key borrowing rates unchanged since aggressive rate hikes first began in March 2022 in an effort to bring inflation down to its target of 2%. The U.S. Fed said its latest decision to freeze rates is in line with its goals of achieving maximum employment and dampening inflation to 2% over the long run. In a press release, the U.S. Central Bank said that recent indicators show that economic activities has been expanding at a solid pace and that while job gains have slowed in recent months but remain strong, the employment rate has remained low. It also added that the U.S. banking system is sound and resilient. Meanwhile, during a press conference, Fed Chairman Jerome Powell hinted at the likelihood of another rate hike down the road.
Today, we decided to leave our policy interest rate unchanged and to continue to reduce our securities holdings. Looking ahead, we are in a position to proceed carefully in determining the extent of additional policy firming that may be appropriate.
The latest rate freeze by the U.S. Federal Reserve leaves the gap between the key rates of South Korea and the U.S. in the 1.75 to 2 percentage points range. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Matthew Ashley, and we now turn over to stories from around the world. We begin at the United Nations Security Council, where Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy called for Russia to be stripped of its veto power. Now, speaking on Wednesday with Russia's UN ambassador present, Zelenskyy said that it was impossible to stop the war in Ukraine due to Moscow's abuse of its veto power. The 15-member Security Council is meant to ensure international peace and security, but it cannot take action on any measure that gets vetoed by one of the 5 permanent members, which includes Russia. Zelenskyy suggested changing the rules to allow the UN General Assembly to override any Security Council vetoes. The Ukrainian leader's appeal for reform echoes calls by countries in the global south who are also unhappy with the Security Council's structure. Now, in the United Kingdom, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has announced a delay to a number of key policies meant to tackle climate change. Speaking to reporters on Wednesday, the delays include pushing back a ban on selling new petrol and diesel cars from 2030 to 2035, a slowdown on phasing out gas boilers, and that homeowners will not be forced to improve insulation to improve energy efficiency. The PM reasoned that the delays would help ease the unacceptable cost of energy transition for British households. He also repeated his plans to expand oil and gas drilling in the North Sea. The moves have been met with a backlash from some businesses that have invested in EV projects in the country, as well as from environmental groups. Sunak said the UK is still committed to going net zero by 2050. Now, Iran's parliament has adopted a new law that toughens penalties for women not following the Islamic dress code. If the law gets final approval from the Guardian Council, it will be implemented for a trial period of 3 years. Under the changes, women not wearing headscarves or long, loose-fitting clothing could face up to 10 years in prison. The bill also punishes businesses serving women not wearing a headscarf properly and those who protest it. A growing number of women in Iran have stopped covering their hair recently. This follows a nationwide protest a year ago over the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini. She died in the custody of Iran's morality police last year after being arrested for allegedly not wearing her hijab correctly. And finally, researchers have discovered what may well be the oldest man-made wooden structure dating back almost 500,000 years. According to a study published in the journal Nature on Wednesday, the structure is composed of overlapping logs attached together with a notch. The structure was unearthed in 2019 in a riverbed in Zambia, near its border with Tanzania. A few wooden tools were also discovered. It's believed that the structure was used as the base for a walkway or platform. Its age means that it could have even been made by an extinct species of humans. The find could also mean that Stone Age humans stayed at the site for an extended period or made frequent return visits.
Good morning. It rained nationwide yesterday, and certain parts of the country are still seeing some showers this morning. In southeastern regions, we'll see rain through tonight, and 5 to 30 millimeters of showers are expected there, while Jeju Island could see rain into tomorrow morning. But upper regions will be under partly sunny skies today. Afternoon highs will be similar to yesterday for the capital, but rain-affected regions will notice cooler daytime highs, so please dress a bit warmer than yesterday. Strong winds will drag down the feels-like temperatures. Speaking of which, it was a breezy night for us in the upper regions, starting off the day at about 18 degrees this morning here in Seoul, and Seoul and Gwangju will be going up to 24 degrees this afternoon. It's going to be a breezier morning tomorrow, and temperature gaps will get wider, so please take good care of yourselves to avoid catching a cold. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for Friday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.